Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this Blitz chess postmortem, a postmortem of my Blitz game number 450. My opponent played f4 here, bird's opening. And a lot of times I've played e5. You can find other videos like that on this channel. That's called the From Gambit, but I wanted to play something different, so I played d5, the more solid response. You can play d5 and knight f6 in pretty much either order here. And e3, one of the main responses, also knight f3. Knight f6, get a pretty normal position, and I go for g6, the fianchetto setup. It looks like bishop to g4 is also an interesting way to play at this point, pinning the knight, and I guess the bishop looks pretty good on these light squares, so it makes sense to get it out. I'm not so the engine is recommending e6 there. I don't agree with that move. That just blocks in this light squared bishop. So I'm trying to avoid that by playing a move like g6. But the other idea of getting the bishop outside the pawn chain is interesting as well. And then my opponent, instead of playing centrally with d3 or bishop e2, is preparing to castle. Those are common ideas. Quick castling or d3 pushing forward in the center. He goes for a counter fianchetto with b3. It's not a bad way to play. And we get this kind of position, but well, the bird's opening overall is not such a great opening for white. You see it it pretty much gives away the opening advantage, so we get an even game. So you should always be happy to play a game like this as black. If you see the bird's opening, it's a welcome sight. And so anyway, bishop to e2, preparing for his castling, and now probably c5 is the best move here, grabbing more space. Also developing the bishop is an idea. But knight to c6 isn't a terrible move, and we see we're still in a position which is about even. But this was the start of a flawed plan. I was preparing an early e5 push, and it doesn't quite work. So put it on the board. After e5, he can just take this. Now, he did take it, but he took it with a pawn, which is what I was expecting. And so this line we get is the line I had calculated. He takes, I go here, and round up the pawn. And he can't protect it with the move d4 because then I can take the pawn on e3. So that's fine for me. But he had different ways of taking the pawn. Most interesting is taking it with the knight. And after this, I'm not getting my pawn back. If I try to grab this pawn and say he takes back and then try and round it up, well, this square is no longer available. The bishop and the queen are protecting that. I have to go here, and now he can play the move d4 and just hold on to it. So so white keeps his extra pawn there. So this move e5 that I played was just a blunder in this position, and which means this this knight move is really not the right idea in this position. Although I could still play on, get the bishop out, put the pawn on e6 instead of e5, play like that with about an equal position. But yeah, e5 was just losing. So luckily for me, he took the way I intended for him to take, and I was able to play knight g4 and gather the pawn up. So he went knight a3 here. He didn't waste time, just continued his development. I take the pawn back. He decided to trade knights here. And then he played his rook to b1. This is kind of a mysterious move. I don't get it. I guess what it does, it protects the bishop, because there was a threat of knight to f3 check, which would win the bishop. But it would cost something too. Let's see. What does the chess engine recommend here? d4. Yeah, d4 is a logical move. Just blocking that diagonal, that ends the threat as well. Or c3. Okay, but rook b1 deals with that threat. I played c6, just showing up my center. He goes c4, undermining. And I go bishop to e6. So through all of this, position is maybe about even to slight edge for black, but nobody's doing anything too bad. He takes here. I think it makes sense for him to try and open up lines for his pieces. Bishop takes, knight to c4. Here's my second mistake. So the first one was e5, which he didn't take advantage of. And he doesn't really take full advantage of this mistake as well. Now this one's a little harder to calculate, but it's an interesting exercise. I played knight takes c4, and actually with correct play, this just loses a pawn. And if you want to think about it, this would be a good opportunity for you to pause the video and try and calculate out that sequence and see why it loses a pawn. It's about 3 moves deep, so it's not too deep. You can figure it out. Okay, I'm going to give the answer away. I took here, and he takes back with the pawn. And it's important, this move comes with tempo. It's hitting my bishop, and I have to do something about it. And this file is starting to be opened, the B file. That exchange and the taking back with the pawn allowed him to partially open that file. And now he has the ability to trade off bishops and fully open the file. I went to E4 here. And he played D3, but right here he could have traded bishops. He trades bishops later in the game anyway, and then he can just grab this B pawn. It's just hanging. And, well, let's see, I have some kind of tactic against the rook here, but it doesn't gain anything. It just chases the rook back. So, yeah, not much going on. After C5, rook to B3, it looks like is fine. So, anyway, he first kicked my bishop again. He played D3. I dropped my bishop back here to F4. And then he played bishop takes G7, king takes. And right now he can still take. So he's played this fine so far, but he should just grab the pawn at this point. And instead he played E4, kicking my bishop one more time. And that's just one time too many, because now my bishop can retreat and defend the pawn, which I noticed was hanging by this time. Now the engine points out this nice intermediate move. I can throw in the move queen d4 check, which this would be a good square for the queen, and then retreat my bishop to defend the pawn, and that would be the best way to play it. I just went bishop c8 immediately, but I'm out of danger, and we get a position which is about even. Queen d2, c5. I spot an idea here. I notice all those pawns are on light squares, and I'm trying to fix them that way and make this a bad bishop. He goes queen c3 check, driving my king back, and then queen f6, offering to trade queens. And I could just take the queens off. Yeah, the engine is thinking that's the best move. I mean, that's a fine endgame for me, but not much of an advantage. So I decide to wait and see what he's doing. I shore up my pawns over here to free up my bishop. He plays rook d to b1. Now that it wasn't hitting anything on the b file anymore. I develop my bishop to b7, taking a look at the e pawn and preventing him from pushing this pawn forward. And at this point he decides to trade queens. So I think this is probably a mistake. Cancel that. Let's back up. He played queen takes d8. I think that's a mistake because this endgame I have the better chances. His bishop is not very good, and he has some backwards and weak pawns that I can attack, whereas my structure is pretty solid. So I should be happy to play this endgame, and he should be trying to avoid it. And so I thought I was doing okay in the endgame for a while, but I missed my best chance somehow. Let's see, I put the rook on the e file. This is good so far. He goes rook to e1. And one idea, yeah, it comes and goes, but the engine at one point suggests the move f5. And this might be one of the ways I can try and create some more weaknesses. That's what I need to do, is create targets for my pieces. I was a little reluctant to do this because it seems to liberate his bishop. But if he takes, for example, well, I can throw in this exchange, take the rooks off, then take the bishops off, and go into this rook endgame where I just picked up a pawn, and I've got 2 pawns under attack. And now he can save things. He can take here, I take back, and then he can defend the f-pawn. So everything is defended, but in this position, well, the rooks are still on, so there's still going to be some play. And he's got 4 weak pawns, and I really have a pretty good pawn structure. So this is another endgame. The engine already gives it a -1, which is pretty strong considering the material is even. So this is an endgame I could play for a long time and push for an advantage. I didn't spot that idea. And so I try maneuvering with my rooks. He goes king f2. Went king g7, getting the king into the game. g3. Bishop c6. Yeah, I haven't quite got a plan here, so I'm just kind of moving my pieces around. He goes rook d2. I went rook to d4, blockading his pawns for the moment. He goes rook e to e2. Cancel that. Sorry, he puts his rook sideways. I always think he's doing it the other way. I went rook back. No, the other rook. Cancel that. I went rook back to e8. Yeah, I don't really have a plan here. This allowed him to push on with e5. And so I could avoid the exchange of bishops with bishop d7. Maybe it's a little better, but bishop takes is not bad either. I mean, I still have this artificially isolated pawn to attack, and I thought I was going to win it, but I missed something. Okay, I went rook e6 to blockade it first. He went a4. And I bring the other rook around to pile up on it, rook to d7. He went rook to e3, so he can double as well. So both of us have doubled. And then I quickly played e6, but or f6 there, trying to attack the pawn on e5. But really that does nothing at all. I guess I should push on with the h pawn. Oh, you know, it's funny, f6 is given as one of the moves here. The thing about f6 is he takes with check. In any case, his rook is adequately defended by both his rook and his king, so it didn't seem like I was going to be able to win anything. Maybe that's why I finally played that move, because I just gave up on trying to win that pawn. He went rook e4. I decided to take off one pair of rooks. I took back with the rook, and then went rook d7. He still has this weakness that I can go after, but from an engine point of view, this is completely even. And I think that's probably accurate. He goes king e3. He can defend this pawn with his king. As long as there's only one weakness for me to attack, it's hard for me to make progress. I pushed on with h6, and he went d4. He's dissolving his weakness, so good play. I think I played this endgame pretty well. C takes, rook takes, and I give a check. Still hoping to penetrate with my rook, but he blocks it. So at this point, I'd give up on the endgame and go for the pawn. Now it's interesting. The engine is saying I could have tried rook e5, not directly taking, but if he takes and my king comes forward to e5, it's a slightly better position for me. When I take, his king comes forward, so I'm actually helping him out. And if he doesn't take, then maybe my rook can move along the fifth rank and attack these pawns. So I gave up on the rook endgame a little too soon. Went to this pawn endgame, but unfortunately this is drawn. I go here, and he played h3, and for a moment the chess engine thinks that king d6 is winning. But if you actually play this move, this shows one of the flaws of chess engines. Go ahead and put that move on the board, king d6. He goes king d4. Well, we'll give it time to think. It has to look a little deeper. Eventually it figures out that this is still a draw. Yeah, there it goes. It dropped down. I can play g5, but this doesn't really lead to anything. h4. h4 is a way for him to equalize. In any case, I just thought that was a funny incident. The engine for the moment seems really convinced that I'm winning there, but as you play the moves, it always drops down to even with the best moves for white. So anyway, I went with g5 here, trying to take squares away from his king, and he locks things up. And if I could just get to this square when his king is on this square, I actually have winning chances. But he plays this part really well, so we're doing this kind of dance. I'm waiting for him to move to this square, and he's waiting for me to move to that square. And finally, here I give up and move to that square, and then he plays king c3. And it's my move, and I just have to retreat. If it were his move, and we got to this position, then his king would have to go sideways, and then my king could penetrate, and then I would have some chances. But as it stands, this is a complete draw. So that's how the game ended. Kind of an interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you again soon. Bye.